After years wrongly imprisoned, he returns home and is shocked by what he sees. David Harrison walked slowly along the dirt road he knew so well, carrying only a small bag with his few belongings. 7 years had passed since he had been taken from there in such a humiliating way, handcuffed in front of all the neighbors. Now at 45, his innocence had finally been proven, but the lost time would never return. When he turned the corner and saw the place where his house stood, his legs almost gave way. The brick construction he had built himself, brick by brick, was partially collapsed, with the roof caved in on one side and cracked walls. But what impacted him most were the little faces that appeared in the crooked windows at the front. 5 children watched him in silence, his own children, but they seemed not to recognize him. The oldest, who was just an 8-year-old girl when he left, was now there at the door at 15, holding a small child in her arms. She looked at him with a mixture of distrust and something David couldn't decipher. Was it anger? Was it fear? "Dad?" Her voice came out hesitant, almost a whisper. David tried to smile, but tears began to well up. How to explain to those children that he had never abandoned them? How to fix 7 years of forced absence? "Sarah, my daughter," he said, taking a step forward, but she instinctively stepped back. "Why did you come back?" the girl asked, and there was a hardness in her voice that broke David's heart. From inside the house he could hear children's voices whispering among themselves. His other children, Ethan, who should be 12 now, Grace with 10, Caleb with 8, and little Lily with only 6 years. Lily was just a baby when he was arrested. She didn't remember him. "Can I come in?" David asked gently, but Sarah hesitated. "The neighbors will talk," she said, looking around. "They already talk a lot about us." David felt a pang in his chest. What kind of life had his children led during his absence? What kind of judgments and prejudices had they faced? "Sarah, I need to talk to you all. I need to explain what happened." The girl studied him for a long moment, as if trying to decide if she could trust him. Finally, she took a few steps back and gestured for him to enter. The inside of the house was even worse than the outside. The roof leaked in several places. There were buckets scattered on the floor to collect rainwater, and the few pieces of furniture that remained were broken or worn by time. The smell of mold mixed with an odor of dampness filled the entire space. The other children appeared gradually. Ethan, a tall, thin boy for his age, looked at David with a mixture of curiosity and resentment. Grace hid behind Sarah, shy. Caleb watched from afar, leaning against the wall, while little Lily clung to her older sister's skirt, clearly afraid of the stranger who had entered their home. "Children," David began, his voice choked, "I know you don't understand what happened. I know you think I abandoned you. But I swear on everything that is holy that I would never, ever do that to you." "So where were you?" asked Ethan, and there was challenge in his voice. "Why didn't you come back? Why did Mum cry every night?" The mention of his wife made David stagger. Where was Susan? He had tried to contact her through the lawyer, but never got a response. "Where is your mother?" asked David, but from the silence that fell and the way the children looked down, he already knew it wasn't good news. "She left," said Sarah, her voice sounding dry. 2 years after you left, she left too. Said she couldn't take the shame anymore." David felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. Susan had gone. He had left the children alone. "How did you survive all these years?" he asked, looking around the miserable house. "Mrs. Gable, the neighbor, helped us sometimes. I've worked at Linda's diner since I was 13, Sarah explained, with a maturity she shouldn't have had at her age. "Ethan sells candy at the stoplight after school. Grace takes care of the little ones when I'm not here." David Harrison sank heavily into an old chair, which creaked under his weight. His children had grown up in poverty, forced to work like adults, while he was in prison, paying for a crime he didn't commit. "Sarah, please sit here," he asked, gesturing for her to come closer. Reluctantly, the girl obeyed but kept her distance. "I need you to know the truth. I didn't abandon you. I was arrested." "Arrested?" Ethan stepped closer, interested now. "But why? What did you do?" asked Grace, speaking for the first time. David took a deep breath. How do you explain such a complex situation to children? I had a small construction company with my partner, Grant Sterling. You remember him? He used to come to the house sometimes. One day he accused me of stealing money from the company, said I was embezzling client funds. Were you? Asked Ethan bluntly. No, David answered firmly. I would never do that. But Grant had forged papers, had falsified my signature on documents. When the justice system investigated, it looked like I was guilty. Sarah looked at him with skepticism. If you were innocent, why were you locked up for so long? Because Grant was very clever. He planned everything perfectly. And I was too trusting. I didn't keep all the papers I should have kept. I never imagined someone I trusted could do this to me. Outside, David could hear the voices of neighbors talking. Every now and then, someone would walk slowly past the house, clearly curious to see who had arrived. Do the neighbors know I'm back? Asked David. Some must have seen you by now, replied Sarah. And they don't like us, Dad. They think we're a family of thieves. The word Dad coming from Sarah's mouth sounded like music to David's ears, even amid the painful situation. How did you find out I was in prison? He asked. Mom said you had run off with the company money, answered Grace. She said you weren't coming back. David closed his eyes, feeling the sting of betrayal. Did Susan know the truth? Or did she really believe Grant's version? And you believed it? There was an uncomfortable silence. It was Ethan who answered, We didn't know what to think. First you disappeared all of a sudden. Then the house started falling apart because there was no money for repairs. Mom started drinking and crying every night. The neighbors talked badly about us. We had to believe something. David knew he couldn't blame the children for believing the story they were told. They were too young to understand the complexities of the situation. Dad, said Sarah hesitantly, how do we know you're telling the truth now? It was a fair question, and David knew it. Because I was released, Sarah. My innocence was proven. The lawyer managed to prove the documents were fake, that the signatures were forged. He pulled some yellowed, crumpled papers from his bag. These are the court documents. You can read them. It says right here that I was cleared of all charges. Sarah took the papers and tried to read, but the legal language was hard to understand. So what happens now? Asked Ethan. David looked around the ruined house, at his thin, poorly dressed children, at the poverty surrounding them. Now, I'm going to fix all this. I will rebuild our family, our home, our life. How? Asked Sarah, a hint of sarcasm in her voice. You have no money, no job, nothing. David Harrison knew she was right, but he also knew he couldn't give up. I'll figure it out. I'll work. I'll fight. I'll prove to you all that I'm a real father. At that moment, they heard a voice from the door. David Harrison, you've got some nerve coming back here. David turned and saw Margaret, the neighbor Sarah had mentioned. She was a woman in her 60s, with graying hair and a stern expression. Mrs. Gable. David stood up and went to the door. You have the gall to show your face after abandoning these children, she said, loud enough for other neighbors to hear. Mrs. Gable, you don't understand. I didn't abandon my children. I was in prison. In prison, my foot. You ran off with the money and left these children to go hungry. Do you think we're fools? David noticed other people had gathered at the door, curious neighbors coming to see the scandal. Well, look who's back, said a male voice. It was Arthur, another neighbor. David Harrison, the thief. I am not a thief, David said, trying to stay calm. My innocence was proven. Proven by who? By yourself? Laughed Margaret. You vanished from town, David. No one saw you get arrested. One day you were here, the next you were gone. David realized Grant had been very clever in spreading that version. How could the simple folks in that neighborhood tell the difference between someone who ran away and someone who was arrested? Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. Dad, Sarah appeared at his side. Let them talk. Come inside. David obeyed his daughter, but he could hear the neighbors' comments outside. Poor kids. That man is no good. He's going to hurt those kids again. Inside the house, the children looked at David with a mix of pity and curiosity. Is it always like this? He asked Sarah. Worse, she replied. When we go out, people whisper. At school, the other kids say we're a criminals family. I'm tired of fighting because of it. David sat down again and pulled Lily, the youngest, close to him. The girl resisted at first, but gradually let herself be drawn near. "Lily, do you remember your daddy?" he asked softly. The girl looked at him with her big eyes and shook her head no. "She was only one when you left," explained Grace. "When I was arrested," David corrected, emphasizing the word. "It's important that you all understand this. I didn't leave by choice." "Dad," said Caleb, speaking for the first time, "if you were in prison, why didn't you send a letter? Why didn't you tell anyone where you were?" It was a smart question, and David realized he needed to explain better. "Caleb, when a person is arrested, especially for a crime like theft, the first thing that happens is they're isolated from their family. I tried to reach out to you many times, but the lawyer I was given wasn't very good. He said it was better I not contact you until my situation was resolved." "But 7 years, Dad," insisted Ethan. "The process was very slow, Ethan. And I was in prison in another city, very far from here. Grant had filed charges against me in several different cities, so my case was complicated to resolve." David could see the children were trying to process the information, but there was still doubt in their eyes. "Where do you all sleep?" he asked, looking around the house. "All in the same room," answered Sarah. "The ceiling of the back bedroom collapsed last year. We put mattresses on the living room floor at night." David felt his heart tighten. His children were living in deplorable conditions. "And food? How do you get food?" "I sometimes bring leftovers from the diner," said Sarah. "Mrs. Miller is good to me. And Mrs. Gable, even though she speaks ill of you, sometimes brings a plate of food for the little ones." "I need work," said David, more to himself than to the children. "Who's going to give you work?" asked Sarah, pragmatic. "Everyone here thinks you're a thief." David knew she was right, but he couldn't give up. "Then I'll have to prove I'm not. I'll have to show everyone who I really am." That night, David slept on the living room floor alongside his children. It was uncomfortable and cold, but he was happy to be near them after so long. He lay awake for hours, listening to the children's breathing and planning how he would rebuild their lives. The next day, David woke up early and went out to look for work. First stop, the diner where Sarah worked. Mrs. Miller was a robust, middle-aged woman who had known David since before his imprisonment. "David Harrison," she exclaimed when she saw him enter. "You have the nerve to show your face here?" "Mrs. Miller, I know what you must be thinking, but I can explain." "Explain what?" "That you abandoned 5 children and vanished from the city. Your daughter Sarah has worked for me for 2 years, David. 2 years. A girl who should be playing with dolls is here frying burgers to support her siblings." "Mrs. Miller, I was in prison. My innocence was proven." He showed the documents again. The woman took the papers and read them carefully. "Even if this is true," she said after a while, "where were you when your children needed you most?" "I was in a jail in Texas, paying for a crime I didn't commit." Mrs. Miller studied him for a long moment. "And what do you want now?" "Work. Any work. I need to support my kids." "David, you were a good man before all this happened, but now I don't know. People speak very ill of you." "Mrs. Miller, you've known Sarah for 2 years. She's an honest, hard-working, responsible girl. What kind of father would raise a daughter like that if he were truly a criminal?" The woman seemed to consider this argument. "Sarah is a special girl indeed," she admitted. "She's never given me trouble, never tried to steal anything, always been polite with the customers. Because I raised her to be that way. Before I was imprisoned, I taught my children values. And Sarah kept those values even in my absence." Mrs. Miller sighed. "I can give you a few hours of work in the kitchen, but if you disappoint me, if you do anything suspicious, you're out that very moment." David felt a pang of hope. "Thank you very much, Mrs. Miller. You won't regret it." In the following days, David worked hard at the diner. He arrived early, cleaned everything, prepared the ingredients, and did any task Mrs. Miller asked. The customers were initially uneasy about his presence, and some even left when they saw him, but gradually they began to accept him. At home, the relationship with his children was slowly improving. Lily was starting to get used to him, and sometimes even climbed into his lap. Caleb was still shy, but he no longer ran away when David approached. Grace was beginning to ask questions about what it was like before when she was little. Ethan remained a bit resistant, but David could see the boy was watching his actions. Sarah was the one who took the longest to open up. She had taken on the role of mother for so long that it was hard for her to trust someone else to care for the family. "Dad," she said one night after the younger children had already gone to sleep, "I need to talk to you about something." David, who was fixing a broken chair, stopped what he was doing. "You can speak, my daughter." I'm afraid," she confessed, and David could see it was hard for her to admit it. "Afraid of what?" "Afraid that you'll leave again. These kids have already suffered so much. If you disappear again, I don't know if we'll be able to take it." David put down his tools and approached his daughter. "Sarah, look into my eyes," he said, placing his hands on her shoulders. "I swear to you, by the love I have for all of you, that I will never leave you alone again. What happened before wasn't my choice, but now it is, and I choose to stay with you until my last day of life." Sarah began to cry, and David hugged her. It was the first time she had allowed herself to be vulnerable in front of him. "It was so hard, Dad," she sobbed. "So hard taking care of everyone alone. I was so afraid they would take the kids away from me. I lied to everyone, said that Mom was home but sleeping whenever a neighbor asked." David felt his heart break hearing this. His daughter had lied and deceived to keep the family together. "You did an incredible job, Sarah. You were more of a mother to your siblings than many mothers out there. But now you can be a child again. You can study, you can dream, you can have a normal life." "Dad, I don't even know how to be a child anymore," she said, and that broke David's heart even more. That night, after Sarah fell asleep, David left the house, walking through the quiet streets of the neighborhood. He needed to think, he needed to plan. It wasn't enough just to work at the diner. He needed to clear his name completely. He needed people to know the truth, and for that, he needed to confront Grant Sterling. The next day, David asked Mrs. Miller for a few hours off and went downtown. He found out that Grant now owned a large construction company with an office in an elegant commercial building. When he arrived at the reception, the secretary looked at him with suspicion. "Do you have an appointment?" "Tell Grant that David Harrison is here to speak with him." The young woman made the internal call, and David could see the surprise on her face. He said for you to go up. 10th floor, room 1005. David rode the elevator with his heart pounding. He was about to meet the man who had destroyed his life and the lives of his children. Grant Sterling was older, heavier, and wore an expensive suit. His office was luxurious, with fine wood furniture and a panoramic view of the city. "David," he said, rising from his chair with a false smile. "What a surprise. I heard you were back." David remained standing, studying the man he once considered a friend. "Grant, we both know why I'm here." "Ah, of course. You must be looking for work, right? I can get you something. You know I always liked you." Grant's casual attitude made David furious, but he controlled himself. "I want to know why, Grant. Why did you do this to me?" Grant's smile vanished. "What are you talking about?" "You know exactly what I'm talking about. The document forgery, the forged signatures, the embezzled money. Why did you frame me?" Grant sat down slowly and was silent for a moment. "David, you just got out of prison. Maybe it's best you don't keep digging up the past." "The past, Grant, my children lived in misery for 7 years because of what you did. My wife left me. My family was destroyed. That's not the past for me." "And what do you want me to do?" Grant asked, and there was a coldness in his voice now. "I want you to tell the truth. I want you to tell everyone what really happened." Grant laughed. "David, you're dreaming. Even if I had done something, do you think I'd admit it now? Look where I am." He gestured to the luxurious office. "Look where you are. Do you think anyone will believe your word over mine?" David felt an anger he had never felt before, but he knew losing control wouldn't help. "I'm going to prove it, Grant. I'm going to prove what you did." "How?" Grant laughed again. "David, it's been 7 years. There's no evidence of anything left, and even if there were, who would care? You've already been tried and convicted. The fact that you were released doesn't mean you're innocent. It just means they couldn't prove your guilt beyond a reasonable doubt." David realized Grant was partly right. It would be very hard to prove his innocence now, especially with Grant in such a powerful position. Besides, Grant continued, I heard your kids are doing fine. They grew up, became independent. Maybe it was even good for them to learn to fend for themselves. That sentence made David explode. How dare you say that? He shouted, moving toward Grant's desk. My children went hungry. My 15-year-old daughter had to drop out of school to work. They live in a house that's falling apart. Grant pressed a button on the phone. Security, please come here. No need to call security, said David, regaining control. I'm already leaving. But this isn't over, Grant. One way or another, I'm going to prove what you did. David left the office angrier than when he arrived, but also more determined. Grant had shown his hand. He wasn't going to confess to anything, and he would use his power to hinder any attempt by David to clear his name. But David wasn't going to give up. When he got home, he found the kids gathered in the living room with worried expressions. Dad, something happened, said Sarah. What is it? Some men came here today. They said they were from the bank. They told us we have to leave the house. David felt the world spinning. What do you mean? What bank? They left this paper. Sarah handed over an official document. David read it quickly. It was a foreclosure notice. Apparently there was a debt in his name that hadn't been paid for years, and now the bank was collecting it with accumulated interest. This can't be right, David murmured, reading the document again. I never took on this debt. But deep down, he already knew what had happened. Grant hadn't just forged documents to frame him. He had used David's name to take on debts too. Dad, are we going to have to leave here? Asked Caleb, fear in his voice. David looked at his 5 children, all depending on him for an answer he didn't have. No, he said, with more conviction than he truly felt. We're going to fight. This house is ours, and no one is going to take you from here. That night, after the children had fallen asleep, David stayed up reading and rereading the bank document. The debt was for an absurd amount, almost $100,000 with interest. There was no way he could get that money working at the diner. He needed professional help. The next day, David sought out the law office that had handled his case. The lawyer, Stephen Sullivan Eskenerz, was a young, idealistic man who had taken David's case as a favor. David, Stephen smiled when he saw him. How are you adjusting? Stephen, I need your help again. David showed him the bank document. Stephen read it carefully. David, this is serious. This debt is very old, and with the accumulated interest, it's an impossible amount to pay. Stephen, I never took on this debt. I'm sure it's another forgery from Grant. I can investigate, but even if it's forgery, it will be hard to prove after so much time. And in the meantime, you could lose the house. David Harrison sat down heavily in the chair. Doctor, I can't let my children end up on the street. They've already suffered too much. David, I'll be honest with you. Your case will be complicated because you have a criminal record, even though you were later exonerated. Banks and courts tend to be less sympathetic to people in your situation. So what do I do? Stephen Sullivan Eskenerz thought for a moment. I'll investigate this debt, see if I can find any irregularities. But David, you need to prepare for the possibility of having to leave the house, and if that happens, you need to have a plan. David returned home discouraged, but tried not to show it to the children. They had already suffered enough. During dinner, Lily, the youngest, asked an innocent question that broke David's heart. Daddy, if we leave this house, will we have to split up? Why are you asking that, sweetie? Because Chloe from school said that when families have no home, sometimes the kids go to different places. David picked Lily up. Lily, Sarah, Ethan, Grace, Caleb. He looked at each of his children. Listen carefully to what I'm going to say. No matter what happens, we are going to stay together. Always. We are a family, and families don't split up. But what if we have nowhere to live? Asked Grace. Then we'll figure it out. I'll work more. I'll do whatever it takes. But you will always have a roof over your heads and food on the table. Ethan, who had been quiet the whole conversation, finally spoke. Dad, why do bad things always happen to us? David didn't have an answer for that question. How do you explain life's injustices to a child? Sometimes bad things happen to good people, Ethan, but that doesn't mean we should give up. It means we have to be stronger, more united, and fight harder. And what if we lose? Asked Caleb. Then we get up and try again, and again, and again, until we make it. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The following week, Stephen Sullivan Esqueos called David with news. David, I investigated the debt. Indeed, the signature on the documents appears forged, but it will be difficult to prove. And there's more. I found out that Grant Sterling got married. Got married to whom? To your sister, Rachel. David felt as if he'd been shot. Rachel, his younger sister, had married Grant, the same Rachel who had always been envious of the life he had built. When did this happen? 2 years after your arrest. David, I think you need to talk to your sister. She might know things that could help your case. David hung up the phone, stunned. Rachel had married the man who destroyed his life. That couldn't be a coincidence. That night he decided to visit Rachel. She now lived in the Heights, in a large, beautiful house. When Rachel opened the door, her face twisted in surprise and something else David couldn't identify. Fear? David, what are you doing here? Hi, Rachel. Can we talk? Rachel looked behind her, as if checking if anyone was listening. It's not a good time, David. Rachel, I found out you married Grant. His sister turned pale. So what? Can't I marry whoever I want? You can, but I find it strange you'd marry the man who put me in prison. David, you put yourself in prison when you decided to steal the company's money. David couldn't believe what he was hearing. Rachel, you're my sister. You know I would never do that. Do I? David, you were always ambitious. I always wanted more than I could have. It doesn't surprise me that you tried to take a shortcut. David studied his sister's face. Something was wrong there. Rachel was lying, he was sure of it. Rachel, look at me and tell me, do you really believe I'm a thief? For a moment, Rachel's eyes wavered. David could see the internal struggle she was fighting. I think you should leave, David. Grant won't like knowing you were here. Why do you care what Grant will or won't like? David asked, stepping closer. Rachel, what's going on here? At that moment, they heard the sound of a car arriving. Rachel grew even more nervous. David, you have to go. Now. Not until you tell me the truth. What truth? David, you're being paranoid. The car stopped in the garage, and David heard footsteps approaching. Rachel, who are you talking to? It was Grant's voice. David saw the panic in his sister's eyes. No one, honey. Just a salesman. But it was already too late. Grant appeared in the doorway and saw David. David Harrison. What a lovely surprise. The sarcasm in Grant's voice was evident. Grant, David greeted coldly. What are you doing in my house? Visiting my sister. Your sister is my wife now, and I don't think she needs visits from ex-cons. David felt his blood boil. Wrongfully convicted ex-con, he corrected. Wrongfully? Grant laughed. David, you were caught red-handed. The money was in your account. Money that you transferred into my account after forging my signature. Prove it, Grant challenged. David looked at Rachel, who averted her gaze. Rachel, you know the truth. Tell him. David, I think you'd better go, Rachel said quietly. David realized he wasn't going to get anywhere there, at least not at that moment. Fine, but this isn't over, he said, looking directly at Grant. When David got home, he found Sarah crying in the kitchen. What happened, sweetheart? Dad, something awful happened at school today. David sat down beside her. Tell me. The teacher asked us to write an essay about our family hero. I wrote about you. David felt his heart warm. And what was the problem? When I read it to the class, some boys started laughing and saying my hero was a thief. The teacher didn't say anything to defend you, she just changed the subject. David hugged his daughter. Sarah, I'm so sorry you have to go through this because of me. It's not your fault, Dad, but sometimes I get so angry at people. They don't know anything and they just judge. Sarah, you want to know something? I'm proud that you chose me as your hero. Because even with all the difficulties, even with what people say, you believe in me. And that's worth more than anything." That night, David had an idea. If he couldn't prove his innocence through the courts or by confronting Grant directly, maybe he could find people who worked at the company at the time and who knew the truth. The next day, he began searching for former company employees. The first one he managed to locate was Frank, a construction worker who had worked with them for years. David found him at a construction site on the outskirts of town. "Frank," he called. The man turned, and when he saw David, his expression grew cautious. "David, you're back?" "I'm back, Frank, and I need your help." Frank looked around, visibly uncomfortable. "David, I can't get mixed up in this." "Mixed up in what?" "Frank, you've known me for years. You know what kind of person I am." "David, I know, but things have changed. Grant, he's a powerful man now." "Frank, I just need the truth. Do you remember how things were at the company? Do you remember anything suspicious?" Frank fell silent for a moment. "David, Grant threatened me. He said if I said anything to harm him, he'd sue me and make sure I never got another job in construction again." David felt a pang of hope. If Grant had threatened Frank, it was because he had something to hide. "Frank, I'm not asking you to help me publicly. Just tell me what you know." Frank looked around again. "Not here. Meet me tomorrow night at Joe's Tavern, downtown. But David, if anyone finds out I talked to you, I'll deny everything." David agreed. It was a start. At Joe's Tavern, Frank was nervous and drinking more than usual. "David, what I'm about to tell you could be dangerous for me." "Frank, I promise I'll protect you." Frank took a deep breath. "David, I always knew something was wrong. Grant started acting strange a few months before you were arrested. He'd stay late at the office, messing with the computers. And he started asking questions about your personal life, about your family, about where you kept your documents." David listened intently. "There's more. Once I saw Grant practicing your signature. He had a paper with your real signature next to him and was trying to copy it." "Are you sure about that?" "Absolutely. And David, there's one more thing. There's one more. Back then I was dating Megan, who worked in the office. She told me Grant asked her to make some strange bank transfers. She didn't know where the money was going, but she thought it was weird because Grant told her not to mention it to you." David felt he was finally getting close to the truth. "Where is Megan now?" "Ah, David, that's the sad part. Megan had a car accident a few months after you were arrested. She died." David went cold. "What kind of accident?" "Her car went off the road on a curve. The investigation said it was speeding, but Megan was always a careful driver. I always thought it was strange." David began to connect the dots. Megan knew too much, and now she was dead. "Frank, do you think Megan's accident might not have been an accident?" Frank grew even more nervous. "David, I can't think about that. I have a family. I have kids. If Grant finds out I said this—" "Calm down, Frank. No one will find out. But tell me one thing. Do you think Grant would be capable of hurting someone to protect his secrets?" Frank took a long time to answer. "David, the Grant I knew after you were arrested is very different from the Grant who worked with you. He became cold, calculating, and powerful. Very powerful." When David got home that night, he had more questions than answers. If Grant had really eliminated Megan to protect his secrets, David was dealing with someone far more dangerous than he had imagined. The next day, David decided to investigate Megan's death further. He went to the police station where the accident had been recorded. The officer in charge of the case was Chief Thomas O'Malley, a man of about 50 with a tired appearance. "Mr. David Harrison?" he asked when David introduced himself. "Yes, Chief. I wanted to know about the accident involving Megan Shaw, which happened about 5 years ago. May I ask what your interest in the case is?" David explained that Megan had worked at his company and that he was investigating some irregularities related to his own case. "Mr. Harrison, the Megan Shaw case was classified as an accident. She lost control of her vehicle on a curve." "Chief, was there any evidence that it wasn't an accident?" Chief Thomas looked at him carefully. "Mr. Harrison, why are you asking this?" David decided to be direct. Chief, I believe Megan was eliminated because she knew information that could incriminate a very powerful person. Eliminated? Mr. Harrison, these are very serious accusations. Do you have any proof? Not yet, but I'm investigating. Chief Thomas O'Malley was silent for a moment. Mr. Harrison, between you and me, I always thought there was something strange about that accident. Megan was an experienced driver, she knew that road well, and her car was in perfect condition. Did you investigate that possibility? I tried, but I received orders from above to classify the case as an accident and close it. Orders from whom? Chief O'Malley hesitated. Mr. Harrison, I can't give names, but I can say they were people with a lot of power in the city. David knew he was on the right track, but he also knew he was messing with dangerous people. When he returned home, he found a tense atmosphere. Sarah was arguing with Ethan in the living room. What's going on? David asked. Ethan got into trouble at school again, Sarah replied, annoyed. What did you do, Ethan? The boy looked at David defiantly. I hit Billy because he said you were a thief and that our family was a disgrace. David sighed. The consequences of his situation continued to affect his children. Ethan, you can't solve things with your fists. Then how do I solve it? Let him talk badly about my dad? David knelt to be at the boy's eye level. Ethan, I know it's hard to hear those things, but when you fight, you're giving people reason to think our family is violent. But Dad, it's not fair, Ethan began to cry. Why don't people believe you're innocent? David hugged his son. Because they only know one side of the story, son. But I'm working so they can know the truth. What if they never believe it? Then at least we know the truth, and that's what matters. That night, after the children were asleep, David talked to Sarah about the house situation. Sarah, I need to tell you something. It's possible we might have to leave this house. Sarah turned pale. Why? David explained about the false debt and the bank's lawsuit. Dad, where will we go? I'm trying to fix this, Sarah, but if I can't, we'll have to find another place to live. Dad, I don't want to leave here. This is our home. It's the only place I remember Mom. David felt his heart tighten. For Sarah, that house represented the only happy memories she had of the family. Sarah, home isn't a place, it's where the people we love are. If we have to leave here, we'll make a new home somewhere else. It won't be the same, Sarah said, starting to cry. David hugged her, silently promising he would do everything he could not to take his children from that place. The following week, Stephen Sullivan, Esquires, called with bad news. David, the bank is speeding up the process. They want a quick decision on the house. How much time do I have? 2 weeks at most. David felt despair taking over him. 2 weeks to find a way to pay a debt that wasn't his, or to prove the debt was fraudulent. Doctor, what if I could prove the signature on the loan documents is fake? It would be a good defense, but David, you need very convincing proof. And even then, the lawsuit could take months. But my children can't be on the street for months. David, have you considered the possibility of accepting help from the city? They have housing programs. Doctor, those programs separate families. They put the children in different places. I can't do that to my children. That night, David was desperate. He had worked every day at the diner, but the money he earned was barely enough to buy food. There was no way to save up $100,000 in 2 weeks. That's when he remembered something Frank had mentioned. If Grant had forged his signature on the documents that incriminated him, he had probably forged the debt documents too. David decided to conduct a more detailed investigation. He sought out a handwriting expert, Dr. Lawrence Thorne, who had testified in some famous criminal cases. Dr. Thorne, I need you to analyze these signatures. David showed genuine documents with his signature and the bank's debt documents. Dr. Thorne examined the papers with a magnifying glass and other specialized tools. Mr. Harrison, I can say with certainty that these signatures were made by different people. Can you testify to that in court? Of course. It's a crude forgery. Whoever did this wasn't very experienced at forging signatures. David felt a glimmer of hope. He had finally found concrete proof. He took Dr. Thorne's report to Stephen, who was excited. David, this is excellent. We can contest the debt based on this report. But will there be enough time? I'll file for an injunction to stop the eviction until the case is decided." David returned home more hopeful than he had been in weeks. But when he arrived, he found Sarah crying in the backyard. "What happened, my daughter?" "Dad, today at school the principal called me in. She said it might be better if I changed schools." "Why?" "Because of all the problems that are happening. Ethan got into another fight. Caleb is getting low grades because he can't concentrate, and I argued with a teacher who spoke badly about you in front of the class." David sat down on the ground next to his daughter. "Sarah, what did the teacher say?" "She was teaching a lesson on citizenship and said that people who commit crimes against society should face harsher punishments. Then she looked at me and said that some families are a bad example for the other children." David felt the anger growing inside him. "And what did you say?" "I stood up and said my father never committed any crime, that he was arrested unfairly, and that she didn't know anything. Then she sent me to the principal's office." David hugged Sarah. "You did the right thing, my daughter. You defended our family. But Dad, it's getting so hard. Every day we have to face this, and now the principal wants me to change schools." "You are not changing schools. Tomorrow I'm going there to talk to this principal." The next morning David went to his children's school. The principal, Mrs. Eleanor, was a middle-aged woman with a stern expression. "Mr. Harrison, I did want to speak with you." "Well, I want to speak with you too. I heard you suggested my daughter should change schools." "Mr. Harrison, it's nothing personal, but the situation with your children is affecting the school environment." "How so?" "Ethan is fighting constantly. Caleb is having learning difficulties, and Sarah has been aggressive with teachers. Mrs. Eleanor, my children are reacting to the prejudice they are facing at this school. If the teachers treated them with respect, they wouldn't have these behaviors." "Mr. Harrison, I understand your position, but you need to understand mine too. I have to think of all the children at the school. And my children aren't part of all the children?" Mrs. Eleanor was speechless for a moment. "Mr. Harrison, perhaps it would be better if they studied at a school where they don't know your history." "My history? Mrs. Eleanor, what history do you know about me?" "Well, everyone knows you were in jail for theft." "And do you know I was exonerated?" "Yes, but what?" "Mrs. Eleanor, you are an educator. Shouldn't you be teaching children that everyone deserves respect until proven otherwise?" The principal looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Harrison, Perhaps we can find a solution. The solution is to treat my children with the same respect you treat the others. It's to prevent teachers from making prejudiced comments in front of them. It's to create an environment where they can study in peace." "All right, Mr. Harrison. I'll speak with the teachers about this." David left the school knowing he had won that battle, but also knowing the war was far from over. That afternoon, Stephen Sullivan, Esquires, called with news about the injunction. "David, we did it!" The judge granted the injunction. "You can stay in the house until the case is tried." David felt an enormous relief. How long could this take? A few months, maybe even a year, if the bank appeals. It was enough time for David to better plan his defense and perhaps find more evidence against Grant. That night, he gathered his children to give them the good news. "Kids, I have good news. We won't have to leave the house." The children celebrated, especially Sarah, who had been very worried about the possibility of losing the house. "Dad, does that mean we won?" asked Caleb. "It means we've bought more time to fight, son. The fight isn't over yet, but we're on the right track." In the following weeks, David began to investigate Grant's past more deeply. He discovered that Grant had been involved in other questionable schemes over the years. Through contacts Stephen Sullivan, Esquire, had at the courthouse, David found out that Grant had been the target of other investigations, but always managed to get off using his influence and economic power. "David," Stephen Sullivan, Esquire, said during a meeting, "I found something interesting. Grant has a shell company registered in his sister Rachel's name." "What kind of company?" "A consulting firm that, on paper, provides services to several construction companies in the region. But when I investigated, I found the company never provided any service. It's just a way to launder money." David realized his sister was more involved in Grant's schemes than he had imagined. "Doctor, does that mean I can use this information against them?" It means we have more ammunition. If we can prove Grant has shell companies, it becomes easier to prove he's capable of falsifying documents too. David decided to confront Rachel again, but this time with more information. He waited for an afternoon when he knew Grant was away on a business trip and went to his sister's house. Rachel grew nervous when she saw him at the door. "David, what do you want now?" "I want to talk to you about the consulting company in your name." Rachel paled. "What company?" "Rachel, don't pretend you don't know. Sentinel Strategy Group. Registered in your name, but which is really a shell company for Grant." Rachel tried to close the door, but David stopped her. "Rachel, you're committing crimes to protect Grant. Money laundering, document forgery. You could go to jail." "David, you don't understand." "Then explain it to me. Explain why my own sister helped put me in jail." Rachel began to cry. "David, I didn't want this to happen. But it did. I lost 7 years of my life, Rachel. My children grew up in poverty. My wife left me. All because of you and Grant." "David, you don't understand. Grant, he threatened me. Said if I didn't help, he would hurt you even more." David couldn't believe what he was hearing. "What do you mean?" Rachel wiped her tears. "David, when Grant started planning all this, he came to talk to me. He said you were embezzling money from the company and that he needed my help to prove it." "And you believed him?" "At first, yes. Grant showed documents, bank statements, and it looked real. And David, you were always more successful than me. He always had the beautiful house, the perfect family, the thriving business. I was jealous." David felt a mix of anger and sadness. "So you betrayed me out of jealousy?" "It wasn't like that. David, when I realized Grant had lied, that you were truly innocent, it was already too late. You had already been convicted. And why didn't you tell the truth?" "Because Grant said if I said anything, he would tell the police that I was also involved in the scams. He had forged documents in my name too." David began to understand. Grant had used Rachel, then blackmailed her to keep silent. "Rachel, you need to testify against him. It's the only way to end this." "David, I can't. He'll destroy me." "He's already destroyed you, Rachel. Look at what you've become. You're an accomplice to a criminal." Rachel cried harder. "David, I'm scared. Grant isn't a normal person. He's capable of anything to protect himself." "Are you talking about Megan?" Rachel's eyes widened. "How do you know about Megan?" "So it's true? Grant killed Megan?" Rachel panicked. "David, I can't talk about this. If Grant finds out I spoke..." "Rachel, Megan died because she knew too much. You also know too much. Do you think you're safe?" Rachel seemed to consider this. "David, even if I wanted to testify, I don't have concrete proof. Grant is very careful. But you have access to his house, to his documents. You can find evidence." "David, you're asking me to spy on my husband." "I'm asking you to do the right thing. To help me clear my name and make sure Grant pays for his crimes." Rachel was silent for a long moment. "David, I need to think." "Rachel, the longer you wait, the harder it will be. Grant is getting more powerful every day." "David, give me a few days. I promise I'll think about what you said." David left his sister's house with conflicting feelings. On one hand, he was happy to know that Rachel hadn't betrayed him out of malice, but because she had been manipulated. On the other hand, he was frustrated because she was still afraid to do the right thing. On the way back home, David realized he was being followed. A black car always kept the same distance from him. When he got home, the car drove straight past, but David had the feeling the occupants were watching his house. That night he told Sarah about his suspicions. "Dad, do you think they could do something to us?" "I don't know, Sarah. But let's be careful. If you notice anything strange, tell me immediately." In the early hours, David was awakened by a noise in the backyard. He got up silently and looked out the window. There were 2 figures messing around near the back of the house. David woke Sarah, whispering, "Sarah, get the kids and go to the bathroom. Lock the door and don't come out until I say it's okay." "Dad, what's happening?" "Just do as I say." While Sarah gathered her siblings, David grabbed a piece of wood and went out the back door. "Hey, who's there?" he shouted. The figures ran, jumping the fence and disappearing into the darkness. David examined the spot where they had been. They had dug a few holes in the ground, as if looking for something. When the children came out of the bathroom, David explained what had happened. "Dad, what were they looking for?" asked Ethan. David remembered he had buried a box with important documents in the backyard before he was arrested. Could Grant have known about it and been trying to retrieve evidence? The next day, David dug at the spot where he had buried the box years ago. To his surprise, it was still there, just a little damaged by moisture. Inside the box, David found old company contracts, correspondence, and other documents he had kept as a precaution. Among the papers, he found something that made him stop. A letter that Megan had written to him shortly before her arrest, but had never delivered. In the letter, Megan said she had discovered irregularities in the company's books and suspected that Grant was embezzling money. She asked David to be careful and said she had kept copies of some documents as proof. David took the letter to Stephen Sullivan, Esquires, who became very interested. "David, this letter is important evidence. It proves Megan suspected Grant before her arrest. But, Counselor, Megan is dead. How can this letter help? The letter proves there was a motive for Grant to want to silence Megan, and if we can find the documents she mentioned..." David remembered that Megan lived with her mother, Mrs. Shaw, a 70-year-old woman who still lived in the same house. David decided to visit her. Mrs. Shaw received David affectionately. She had always liked him and never believed he was guilty. "David, my boy, it's so good to see you free." "Mrs. Shaw, I need to talk to you about Megan." The woman's face grew sad. "Oh, my Megan, I still miss her so much." "Mrs. Shaw, before she died, Megan mentioned she had kept some important documents. Do you know where they might be?" "David, after Megan died, I kept all her things in a trunk in the attic. I've never had the heart to go through it." "Would you let me look?" Mrs. Shaw thought for a moment. "If it can help bring justice for my daughter, you may look." In the dusty attic, David found the trunk with Megan's belongings. Among clothes and personal items, he found a folder with company documents. The documents clearly showed the suspicious transfers Grant had made using David's forged signature. "Mrs. Shaw, may I take these documents to show my lawyer?" "Take them, David. If it can clear your name and punish whoever harmed my Megan, you can take it all." David left Mrs. Shaw's house with a feeling that he was finally close to the full truth. But when he got home, he found a situation that left him desperate. Sarah was crying in the living room, holding Lily in her arms. "Dad, they took Ethan." "What do you mean they took him? Who took him?" "Two men came here. They said they were from social services, that they had a report that the children were being neglected. They took Ethan for evaluation." David felt his world collapse. Grant had attacked where it hurt most, his children. "Sarah, where are the others?" "Grace and Caleb are in the bedroom, scared." "Dad, are they going to take all of us?" David hugged Sarah and Lily. "No one is taking you. This is harassment. I'm going to get Ethan right now." David called Stephen Sullivan, Esquires, who was outraged by the situation. "David, this is clearly retaliation. Let's go to the courthouse right now to file an order to have Ethan returned." At the courthouse, David learned that the report had been anonymous, alleging that the children lived in inadequate conditions and that David had a criminal record. "Counselor, can they do this? Take a child from the family without proof?" David, theoretically, no, but if they claim imminent danger, they can remove them temporarily pending a more thorough investigation. "Where is Ethan now?" "Probably in a temporary shelter. Let's request a hearing with the family court judge." The hearing was scheduled for the next day. David spent a sleepless night, imagining how Ethan must be feeling, alone in a strange place. At the hearing, David faced a social worker who seemed to have already formed an opinion about him. "Mr. Harrison, we received a report that your children are living in precarious conditions." "Doctor, my house isn't luxurious, but my children have a roof, food, and love. Those are not precarious conditions." "Mr. Harrison, you have a criminal record." "From which I was cleared," David interrupted. The judge, Anthony Wright, seemed a fair man. "Stephen Sullivan, Esquire, what is your client's defense?" "Your Honor, this is clearly a persecution. My client was cleared of all charges and is working to rebuild his life with his children. The complaint is anonymous and presents no concrete evidence. And the family's housing situation? The house is being renovated gradually. The children are not in danger. The judge reviewed the documents. I will allow Ethan to return home, but I order that the family be monitored by a social worker for 3 months. If there are any irregularities, the measures will be more severe. David agreed to the conditions. The important thing was to have Ethan back. When Ethan arrived home, he was frightened and traumatized. "Dad, I don't want to leave the house anymore," he said, clinging to David. "No one is going to take you from this house again, Ethan. Daddy promises." That night, David gathered his children. "Kids, I need to talk to you about something serious. The people who are harming our family are going to try to separate us. They'll use any excuse to do it, so we need to be very careful." "Dad, why do they want to separate us?" asked Grace. "Because they know you are the most important thing in my life, and they think if you suffer, I'll give up fighting them." "And will you give up?" asked Caleb. David looked at each of his children. "Never, but I also won't let you suffer because of me. If I have to, I'll stop fighting and accept the injustices as long as you all stay safe." "No, Dad." Sarah stood up. "You can't give up, not after everything we've been through." "Sarah." "Dad, all these years, the only thing that gave me strength was thinking that one day the truth would come out, that one day people would know you are an honest man. If you give up now, everything we've suffered will have been for nothing." David was moved by his daughter's maturity. "Sarah, are you sure? It could get harder for you." "We've already been through the worst, Dad. Now we have you with us. We can get through anything." The other children agreed. Even the youngest understood the family had to fight together. David decided to accelerate his investigations. With the documents found at Mrs. Shaw's house and the handwriting analysis report, he had solid evidence against Grant. But he knew Grant wouldn't stand still. The episode with Ethan was just the beginning. Stephen Sullivan, Eskiers, suggested that David approach the local media. "David, if you make your case public, it becomes harder for Grant to persecute you anonymously." David didn't like the idea of exposing his children, but he was running out of options. "Doctor, what if this makes things worse for the kids?" "David, the situation is already bad. At least this way you'll have public opinion on your side." David decided to give an interview to a local journalist, Arthur Miller, who was known for investigating corruption and injustice cases. "Mr. Harrison, tell me your story." David told everything: the wrongful imprisonment, the 7 years away from his children, the discovery of Grant's setup, the evidence he had found. "And do you have proof of these allegations?" David showed the documents, the handwriting report and Megan's letter. Arthur Miller was impressed. "Mr. Harrison, this is quite a story. May I publish it?" "You may. But please, protect my children. Don't publish their photos or any details that could compromise them." The story ran in the local newspaper and caused a major stir. People who knew David began to speak out in his defense. Neighbors who once rejected him began to reconsider their opinions. Grant was furious with the exposure and took a desperate action. He showed up at David's house accompanied by 2 large men. "David Harrison," he shouted from the street, "come out here so we can talk." David came out, but kept his distance. "What do you want, Grant?" "I want you to stop this smear campaign against me. You're spreading lies and damaging my reputation." "Lies? Grant, I have proof of everything you've done." "You have no proof, and if you keep this up, you'll regret it." "Are you threatening me, Grant?" "I'm warning you. You've seen what can happen to your children when you don't cooperate." David felt the anger explode inside him. "If you touch a single hair on my children's heads, I swear I'll—" "You'll what?" Grant laughed. "What are you going to do? You're nothing, David. You have no power, no money, no influence. I can destroy you as many times as I want. But I have one thing you'll never have, Grant. The truth." Grant let out a sarcastic laugh. "The truth, David? The truth is whatever those in power decide it is, and the one with power here is me." The neighbors began to gather to watch the argument. David noticed some people were filming with their phones. "Grant, you're exposing yourself in front of everyone. You're showing who you really are." Grant looked around and realized too many people were watching. "This isn't over, David," he said, signaling for the two men to follow him back to the car. After Grant left, some neighbors approached David. "David, we saw the piece in the paper," said Mr. Antonio, an elderly neighbor. "We wanted to apologize for believing the lies about you." "Thank you, Mr. Antonio. That means a lot to me." Other people apologized as well. David realized the tide was beginning to turn in his favor. That night, Rachel showed up at David's door. She was nervous and kept looking over her shoulder. "David, I need to talk to you." "Come in, Rachel." "David, I saw the piece in the paper, and today Grant came home furious. He was saying horrible things about you and your children." "What kind of things?" "David, I think Grant is planning to do something worse. He was talking in a way that really scared me." "Rachel, you need to get away from him. That man is dangerous." "David, I brought something for you." Rachel took an envelope from her bag. "What is it?" "These are documents from Grant's office. I copied them when he wasn't looking. There are contracts with forged signatures, suspicious bank transfers. I think you can use this." David was surprised and moved. "Rachel, why are you doing this?" "Because I can't live with this guilt anymore. Because you're my brother, and I betrayed you. Because your children don't deserve to suffer for my mistakes." David hugged his sister. "Thank you, Rachel. I know this must have been hard for you." "David, there's one more thing about Megan." David braced himself for what was coming. "I heard Grant talking on the phone the night before her accident. He was arguing with someone about taking care of the Megan problem. The next day she died." David closed his eyes. His suspicions were being confirmed. "Rachel, you have to testify about this." "David, I'll do whatever it takes to fix the damage I helped cause, but I need you to protect me. Grant can't know I was the one who handed over these documents. Rachel, you can stay here at my house until we sort this out." "I can't. If Grant doesn't find me at home, he'll know something's wrong. But David, promise you'll look after me if things get dangerous." "I promise, Rachel." The next day, David took the new documents to Dr. Stephen, who was ecstatic. "David, this is gold. With this evidence, we can not only definitively prove your innocence, but also criminally prosecute Grant for forgery, fraud, and perhaps even homicide." "Doctor, how long will it take for this to go to court?" "With this amount of evidence and the attention your case is getting, I believe we'll have a decision in a few weeks." David felt he was finally close to victory, but he also knew that it was in these final weeks that Grant would be most dangerous. He was right. 2 days later, David received an anonymous call in the middle of the night. "David Harrison." "Who is this?" "Someone who wants to help you. Grant hired people to hurt you and your family. Leave town today." "Who is this? How do you know this?" But the person had already hung up. David woke Sarah and told her about the call. "Dad, what if it's a lie? What if it's someone trying to scare us?" "Sarah, what if it's true? I can't risk your lives." David made a difficult decision. He took the children and went to Mrs. Miller's house, who had offered help after seeing the story in the newspaper. "Mrs. Miller, I need a favor. Can I leave the children here for a few days?" "Of course, David, but what's happening?" David explained the threat. "David, do you think they're capable of hurting children?" "Mrs. Miller, they already tried to tear my family apart once. I can't take that risk." Leaving his children was one of the hardest things David had ever done, but he knew it was necessary. That night, David stayed awake at home, waiting. Around 3 in the morning, he heard noises in the backyard. This time, it wasn't just 2 people. David could hear several voices whispering. He called the police, but knew it would take time for them to arrive. The men tried to break down the back door. David positioned himself in the living room with a baseball bat he had found among some old things. When the door opened and the men entered, David shouted, "I've already called the police. Get out of my house." But the men didn't back down. One of them said, "David Harrison, you should have stopped when you were warned." David realized they weren't just there to intimidate him. They had worse intentions. The fight was uneven, but David managed to hold out long enough to hear the police sirens approaching. The men fled quickly, but the police managed to arrest one of them. At the police station, David filed a report, and told the whole story to the detective. "Mr. Harrison, the man we arrested refused to talk, but we found this on him." The detective showed a cell phone. In the phone's messages, there were conversations mentioning silencing David Harrison and references to a payment made by GS. "Mr. Harrison, this is evidence of attempted homicide. We will investigate this GS person." David knew that GS were the initials of Grant Sterling, but he let the police reach that conclusion on their own. The attempted attack was news in the local papers, and David's case gained even more attention. Stephen Sullivan used this new development to speed up the process against Grant. "David, now we have Grant in a very difficult position. He tried to silence you with violence, which shows desperation." 3 days later, Grant was arrested as a preventive measure under charges of document forgery, fraud, and ordering an attempted homicide. When David learned of the arrest, he felt a relief he hadn't felt in years. He went to pick up his children from Mrs. Miller's house. "Dad, is it true they arrested the bad man?" asked Lily. "It's true, my dear. He can't hurt anyone anymore." The children celebrated, but David knew the fight wasn't completely over yet. With Grant in jail, Rachel finally found the courage to testify openly. She told everything she knew about her ex-husband's schemes. Grant's trial was an event that drew attention from the entire region, David testified, presenting all the evidence he had collected. During his testimony, David spoke about the 7 years of unjust imprisonment, about his children's suffering, about the destruction of his family. "Your Honor," David said, looking directly at Grant, "I do not seek revenge. I seek justice, not just for myself, but for Megan, who died for knowing the truth, for all the employees who were harmed by his schemes, and especially for my children, who grew up carrying the shame of a crime their father did not commit." The prosecutor presented all the evidence, the forged documents, the handwriting analysis report, Rachel's testimony, the messages found on the henchman's phone. Grant's defense tried to discredit the evidence, but the amount of proof was overwhelming. During his testimony, Grant tried to justify himself. "David was my partner, but he was embezzling money from the company. I only did what any honest person would do." But when confronted with the evidence, especially the forged signatures that had been examined by experts, Grant could not adequately defend himself. The jury deliberated for 2 hours and returned with the verdict, guilty on all counts. Grant was sentenced to 15 years in prison for forgery, fraud, racketeering, and attempted murder. When the sentence was read, David felt as if an enormous weight had been lifted from his shoulders. His children, who were in the audience, began to cry with relief and happiness. After the trial, David was surrounded by journalists. "Mr. Harrison, how do you feel now that justice has been served?" "I feel grateful. Grateful for having been able to prove my innocence. Grateful for having my children with me. Grateful for all the people who supported me during this fight." "What do you intend to do now?" "Now, I am going to dedicate myself to being the father my children deserve. I will rebuild our lives and try to make up for lost time." With the legal victory, David received substantial compensation for the years of unjust imprisonment and the moral damages suffered. The first thing he did was completely renovate the family home. Not just structural repairs, but a complete renovation to turn that house into a real home. Sarah went back to school, this time at a private school where she could have better opportunities. Ethan stopped fighting at school and became one of the top students in his class. Grace discovered a talent for drawing and started taking art lessons. Caleb became interested in music and got a guitar. Lily, now 7 years old, could finally be a normal child, playing and laughing without worries. David used part of the compensation to open a consulting firm that helped people who were victims of corporate fraud. He knew from personal experience how difficult it was to fight against powerful and dishonest people. "Dad," Sarah said one Sunday afternoon as the whole family was having lunch at the new table in the renovated living room, "I want to thank you." "Thank me for what, my daughter?" "For never giving up, for fighting for the truth even when everyone was against you." David looked around the table at his 5 children. They had grown, matured, suffered, but they were there, together, as a family. "Sarah, you don't have to thank me. You gave me the strength to fight. If I didn't have you, I would have given up a long time ago." "Dad," said Ethan, At school now they say I'm the son of the man who fought against injustice. Now I'm proud to be your son." David felt his eyes well up. 6 months after the trial, David received an unexpected visit. It was Susan, his ex-wife. She looked thinner, weary, but she was still the woman he had loved. "David, I came to ask for your forgiveness." David invited her inside. The children were surprised to see their mother. "Susan, what are you doing here?" "David, I found out about everything that happened, about the trial, your proven innocence. I always knew you weren't capable of what they said." "Then why did you leave?" Susan began to cry. "Because I'm weak, David. Because I couldn't handle the pressure, the judgment, the poverty. I thought it would be easier to start a new life somewhere else than to fight alongside you." David looked at Sarah, who was watching the scene with a serious expression. "Susan, you abandoned 5 small children. You let them go hungry and cold." "David, I know there's no forgiveness for what I did, but I wanted to try. I wanted to see if there was a possibility of us being a family again." Sarah rose from her chair. "Mom, for 7 years we waited for you to come back. For 7 years we dreamed of the day we'd have a complete family again." Susan smiled, hopeful. "Sarah, my daughter." "But we don't need you anymore," Sarah continued, her voice firm but not cruel. "We learned to live without you. We learned that family isn't who shares the same blood. It's who sticks together when times are hard." David felt proud of his daughter's maturity, but also pity for Susan. "Susan, I don't hold a grudge against you, but I also can't take you back as if nothing happened." "David, I understand. But maybe we could try a gradual reconnection. For the children's sake?" David looked at his children, who were watching the conversation in silence. "If the children want to, you can visit them sometimes. But Susan, they grew up without you. You can't come here expecting everything to go back to how it was before." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. Susan agreed to the conditions. In the following weeks, she began making regular visits, trying to slowly rebuild the relationship with her children. Lily, being the youngest, was the first to reconnect with her mother. Caleb and Grace also gradually accepted Susan's presence. Ethan kept a certain distance, still resentful of the abandonment. Sarah was the most resistant, but with time she also began to accept conversations with her mother. David, for his part, maintained a cordial but distant relationship with Susan. The romantic feelings had been lost over the years of separation and suffering. 1 year after Grant's trial, David received an unexpected call. "David Harrison." "Yes, who's speaking?" "This is the office of Justice Richard Vance from the Supreme Court. Can you come here tomorrow morning?" David was worried. Could there be a problem with his case? At the court, Justice Richard Vance, a distinguished man of about 60, greeted him with a smile. "Mr. Harrison, I called you here to share some very special news." "What news, Your Honor?" "Your case has drawn the attention of the higher authorities. Your fight for justice, your perseverance, the way you protected your family, all of it has impressed a lot of people." David didn't understand where this was going. "Mr. Harrison, the state has decided to create a foundation to help people who are victims of judicial injustice, and we would like to invite you to lead this foundation." David was surprised. "Your Honor, I'd be honored, but I don't know if I'm qualified for that." "Mr. Harrison, you have the best possible qualification, personal experience. You know exactly what people who are unjustly accused and convicted go through." David accepted the invitation. Running the foundation would mean not just a good salary, but also the opportunity to help other people going through the same situation he had faced. With the new job, David moved with his children to a larger house in the state capital. It was a fresh start for the whole family. Sarah graduated high school with the best grades in her class and got a full scholarship to study law at a federal university. She said she wanted to follow in her father's footsteps in the fight for justice. Ethan discovered a talent for sports and became captain of the school's soccer team. The boy who used to fight out of anger now channeled his energy into positive activities. Grace developed her artistic talent and began selling her drawings at a local gallery. Her works depicted themes of family, unity, and overcoming adversity. Caleb became an excellent musician and started giving guitar lessons to other children. He discovered he enjoyed teaching and helping others. Lily, now 9 years old, was a happy and outgoing child, very different from the shy and frightened girl she used to be. David would sometimes stop and look at his children, still unable to believe the transformation they had all undergone. "Dad," Sarah said one night while studying for her college entrance exams, "do you regret anything?" "Regret? Why?" "For fighting so hard, for exposing us to all those dangers. Maybe if you had accepted the situation, our life would have been more peaceful." David thought about his daughter's question. "Sarah, if I had given up, today you'd be working at a diner instead of preparing to enter university. Ethan would still be fighting at school and getting into trouble. Caleb, Grace, and Lily would be growing up ashamed of their own father. But we also wouldn't have gone through so much suffering. Sarah, the suffering we went through wasn't in vain. It made us stronger, more united, and most importantly, it showed you that it's worth fighting for what's right." Sarah smiled. "Dad, when I'm a lawyer, I want to work with you at the foundation. I want to help other families like ours." David hugged his daughter, proud of the strong and determined woman she had become. 2 years later, David received a call he never expected to get. "David Harrison?" "Yes, who's speaking?" "This is the state penitentiary. Inmate Grant Sterling wants to speak with you." David was surprised. What could Grant possibly want with him after all this time? "Did he say what it's about?" "No, sir. He only said it was very important and that it related to something from the past you need to know." David decided to go. Curiosity? A desire for closure? He didn't know exactly what motivated him. At the prison, Grant looked very different. Thinner, graying hair, a worn-out appearance. The years behind bars had taken their toll. "David," Grant said when they sat face to face, separated by glass. "Grant." "David, I know you must be wondering why I asked you to come here." "I am." Grant was silent for a moment. "David, I want to ask for forgiveness." David wasn't expecting that. "Forgiveness?" "David, these years here have made me think a lot. They made me realize the monster I became, the harm I caused you, your kids. Grant, why did you do that to me? We were friends, we were partners. Why did you betray me?" Grant lowered his eyes. "Out of envy, David. Pure and simple envy. You had everything I wanted, a happy family, the respect of the employees, the admiration of the clients. I had the same job as you, but I had none of that. So you decided to destroy my life. I thought if I got you out of the way, I could have what you had. But David, it wasn't like that. Destroying you didn't bring me happiness. It only brought me guilt and paranoia." David studied Grant's face. There seemed to be genuine remorse there. "Grant, your apologies won't give me back the years I lost with my children. They won't erase the suffering they went through." "I know. David, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I needed to say this to you. And there's one more thing." "What?" "David, I have information about other crimes I committed, people I harmed using the same methods I used against you. If you want, I can give this information to the authorities." David realized Grant was offering help to make up for the wrong he had done. "Why would you do that?" "Because maybe then I can sleep better at night. And because maybe other people can have the same chance at justice that you had." David decided to accept the offer. The information Grant provided led to the identification of more than 20 victims of his fraudulent schemes. The foundation run by David began helping these people as well, guiding them on how to seek justice and restitution. When David left the prison that day, he felt strangely at peace. He hadn't completely forgiven Grant, but he had found a kind of closure he didn't expect. Sarah, who was now in her 3rd year of law school, asked about the prison visit. "Dad, what was it like talking to him?" "Different than I expected. He asked for forgiveness." "And did you forgive him?" David thought about the question. "Sarah, forgiving doesn't mean forgetting or pretending nothing happened. It means not letting the bitterness consume your heart. In that sense, yes, I forgave him." "Do you think he really changed?" I think he understood the harm he did. Whether that means true change, only time will tell. 5 years after Grant's trial, the foundation run by David had already helped more than 200 families achieve justice in cases of false accusations and judicial errors. David became a national reference in the fight for the rights of the wrongly accused. He gave lectures at universities, participated in television programs, wrote articles for newspapers. But for him, the greatest achievement was still seeing his children growing up happy and fulfilled. Sarah graduated from law school and immediately began working at the foundation with her father. Her first client was a woman who had been falsely accused of stealing money from the company where she worked. "Dad," Sarah said after winning her first case, "now I understand why you fought so hard." Seeing that woman's joy when her innocence was proven, there's no feeling like it. Ethan graduated in physical education and opened a sports school for underprivileged children. He said he wanted to give opportunities to boys who, like him, needed to channel their energy in a positive way. Grace became a recognized artist, with her works being exhibited in galleries in several cities. Her most famous work was a series of paintings called Family, which depicted her own family's journey. Caleb graduated in music and became a teacher at a public school. In addition to regular classes, he created a social project to teach music to children from low-income families. Lily, now 15, was a brilliant teenager who dreamed of becoming a doctor. She said she wanted to heal people just as her father had healed their family from injustice. Susan had also found her place in the new family dynamic. Although she never moved back in with David, she became a constant and positive presence in the children's lives. She had gone back to work as a nurse and found a way to contribute to the family. David sometimes thought about how unpredictable life was. Those 7 years in prison, which at the time seemed like an unsolvable tragedy, had ultimately led his family to a better place than they ever imagined. "Dad," Lily asked one evening during a family dinner, "if you could go back in time, would you change anything?" David Harrison looked around the table. Sarah, now a competent and determined lawyer. Ethan, a dedicated young teacher. Grace, a sensitive and talented artist. Caleb, a musician who brought joy wherever he went. Lily, an intelligent teenager full of dreams. "Lily, if I changed the past, you wouldn't be the amazing people you are today. The hardships we went through made us stronger, more united, more determined to make a difference in the world." "So you wouldn't change anything?" "I would change just one thing. I would try to find a way to prove my innocence faster, so you wouldn't have had to suffer for so long." Sarah raised her glass of juice. "A toast to our father, who taught us that the truth always wins, even when it takes time to come out." Everyone raised their glasses and toasted. "To the Harrison family," they said in unison. David smiled, feeling his heart full of love and gratitude. He had started as a broken man returning to a ruined home, but he had become the leader of a strong, united family, dedicated to doing good in the world. The following week, David received an unexpected call. "David Harrison." "Yes, who is this?" "This is the state capitol calling. Could you come here next Friday?" David was curious. What could the government want with him? On Friday, David went to the state capitol accompanied by Sarah. They were received by the governor himself. "Mr. Harrison, it's an honor to meet you in person." "Thank you, Governor. May I ask why you called me here?" "Mr. Harrison, your work leading the foundation and your personal fight for justice have drawn attention not only here in the state but across the country. You have become a symbol of perseverance and the fight for rights." David didn't know where this was going. "Because of that," the governor continued, "we have decided to honor you with the highest award our state can bestow upon a citizen, the Civil Merit Medal." David was moved. Sarah held his hand, also emotional. "Governor, I am deeply honored, but I want to make it clear that I didn't do all this alone. My family, my friends, people like Stephen Sullivan, Eski, were all essential." "Mr. Harrison, it is precisely that humility that makes you deserve this honor even more." The medal presentation ceremony was held in a formal session attended by officials, journalists, and many people David had helped through the foundation. During his acceptance speech, David spoke about the importance of never giving up the search for truth and justice. When I returned home after 7 years of unjust imprisonment and saw my children living in that precarious situation, I could have given up. I could have accepted the injustices and tried to simply rebuild our lives in silence. But I learned that unopposed injustices multiply, that silence in the face of wrongdoing empowers those who commit wrongs. That's why I decided to fight, not just for me and my family, but for all people going through similar situations. Today, looking at my children, I see that the fight was worth it. They have become people who fight for justice, who help others, who make a difference in the world, and that to me is worth more than any medal. After the speech, many people approached David to tell their own stories of injustice and ask for help. "Mr. Harrison," said an elderly woman, "my son has been imprisoned for 3 years for a crime he didn't commit. Can you help me?" David took the woman's information and promised the foundation would investigate the case. This scene repeated itself several times throughout the evening. David realized his work was far from over. On the way back home, Sarah commented, "Dad, did you notice how many people asked for help today?" "I did. It seems our foundation will need to grow more." "Dad, I have an idea. What if we created a national network? Foundations in several states all working toward the same goal." David considered his daughter's idea. "Sarah, it would be a huge project. We would need a lot of money, a lot of work." "But Dad, imagine how many families we could help. How many injustices we could correct," David smiled. Sarah had the same fire he had when he decided to fight against Grant. "Let's start planning on Monday," he said. In the following months, David and Sarah worked tirelessly to create the National Network for Combating Judicial Injustices. Ethan, even while working in sports, offered to handle the network's communication and marketing. Grace created the organization's visual identity, including a logo that showed a united family overcoming obstacles. Caleb composed an anthem for the organization, an inspiring song about never giving up the fight for truth. Lily, even though still a teenager, helped by organizing documents and doing research. The whole family was involved in the project. 2 years later, the national network already had branches in 15 Brazilian states and had helped over 1,000 families. David was invited to give lectures in other countries that wanted to replicate the Brazilian model for combating judicial injustices. But despite the international recognition, he never forgot where he came from and why he started this fight. "Dad," Lily said one afternoon while helping David organize the foundation's files, "do you think there will ever be a day when there's no more injustice in the world?" David stopped what he was doing and looked at his daughter. "Lily, I think there will always be injustice in the world. But I also think there will always be people willing to fight against it. And as long as such people exist, there is hope. And what if one day there are no more people willing to fight? Then we will have failed to pass our values on to the next generations. But I don't believe that will happen. Look at you, at your siblings. You grew up seeing the importance of the fight for justice. You will teach that to your children, who will teach it to theirs." Lily smiled. "Dad, when I grow up, I want to work at the foundation too." "Lily, you can work at whatever you want. What's important is that it's something that makes you happy and contributes to making the world a better place." 10 years after Grant's trial, David received news that left him reflective. Grant had died in prison, a victim of complications from an illness. David felt neither joy nor sadness at the news, just a sense that a chapter of his life had definitively closed. He decided not to attend the funeral, but sent a wreath with a card. "May he find in death the peace he could not find in life." Rachel, who had rebuilt her life and now worked as a volunteer at the foundation, was shaken by the news. "David, I know Grant did horrible things, but he was also human, and in the end, I think he was remorseful." "Rachel, each person makes their choices and lives with the consequences. Grant chose the path of dishonesty and violence. What happened to him was the result of those choices." "But David, don't you feel any pity?" David thought about his sister's question. "I pity the man he could have been. He had talent, intelligence, the ability to build good things, but he chose to use those qualities to do evil. That is tragic." "David, do you think people can truly change?" "I think people can choose to change at any moment. The problem is, They don't always make that choice in time to repair the harm they've caused. That same year, David published a book telling his story. The book, titled The Truth Always Prevails, became a national bestseller. David donated all royalties to the National Network for Combating Judicial Injustices. The book was translated into several languages and inspired the creation of similar organizations in other countries. During a book signing in New York City, a young woman approached David. "Mr. Harrison, I wanted to thank you. My father was unjustly imprisoned 2 years ago. After reading your book, we reached out to the foundation in our city. Today, my father is free." David was moved. "How is your family now?" "We are rebuilding just like you did. It's difficult, but we have hope. Always keep hope. And remember, hardships pass. But the values you build during the hardships stay with you forever." At 55, David looked back and saw a journey he never imagined he would live. From a broken man returning to a ruined house, he had become a national leader in the fight for human rights. But for him, the greatest achievement remained his family. Sarah had married a fellow lawyer and was expecting their first child. She continued working at the foundation and had become one of the country's most respected lawyers in cases of judicial injustice. Ethan had married a teacher and had 2 young children. His sports school had expanded and now served over 300 underprivileged children. Grace had won several national awards for her artwork. She used her art to raise awareness about social issues and human rights. Caleb had become the music director of a major school and created a national program to teach music to hospitalized children. Lily had entered medical school, determined to specialize in social medicine to help underprivileged communities. "Dad," Sarah said during a Sunday lunch at David's new house, "I was thinking about something." "What is it, my daughter?" "In a few months, when my baby is born, are we going to tell him our family story?" "Of course we are." "Why?" "Because I want him to know he comes from a family that fought for justice, that faced hardships but never gave up, that turned suffering into strength to help others." David smiled. "Sarah, that is the greatest legacy we can leave our children, the story of how we overcame adversity while holding on to our values." That night, David went for a walk in the backyard of his new house. It was a large, comfortable house with a well-kept garden where the family's children could play. He remembered the old house with its leaky roof and cracked walls, where he had reunited with his children after 7 years. That house had been demolished a few years ago to make way for a small building, but David kept photos of it. For him, that house represented the beginning of his family's reconstruction. "Dad?" It was Lily who had come out to look for him. "Hi, my daughter. What are you doing up?" "I couldn't sleep. I was thinking about something." David gestured for her to sit beside him on the garden bench. "What were you thinking?" "Dad, sometimes I'm afraid I won't be as strong as you were. If one day I need to face a great injustice, I don't know if I'll have the courage." David hugged his daughter. "Lily, you are already stronger than you think. You grew up seeing that hardships can be overcome. You saw our family rebuild. That gave you a foundation many people don't have." "But what if I fail? What if I can't fight like you fought?" "Lily, everyone faces their battles differently. It doesn't have to be exactly like me. The important thing is to hold on to your values, fight for what's right, and never give up on the people you love." "Dad, what's the most important advice you'd give to someone facing a great injustice?" David thought about the question. "Lily, I'd say never lose hope in the truth. It may take time, it may be hard, but the truth always finds a way to come out. And while you fight for the truth, keep your family close to you because in the end, it's the people we love who give us the strength to carry on." At 60, David was invited by the federal government to head a new national office to combat judicial injustices. It was an opportunity to expand his work even further, but it also meant moving to Washington, D.C. and leaving his family. "Dad," Sarah said when David told them about the offer, "I think you should accept." "But you'll all be here." "Dad, you taught us that sometimes we have to make sacrifices to help more people. This office could help thousands of families across the country." David looked at his other children, who also agreed he should accept. "Are you sure?" "Dad," said Ethan, You were always here when we needed you. Now we're adults. We have our own families. It's time for you to expand your family to include all the people in the US who need help. David was moved by his children's maturity. But I'm going to miss you. We'll miss you too, said Lily, but we'll visit often. And Dad, we'll keep the foundation's work going here. The fight won't stop. David accepted the offer. In Washington, D.C., he created a national system to identify and correct judicial errors. In his first 2 years at the office, over 5,000 people had their wrongful convictions overturned. David's work gained international recognition. He was invited to speak at the UN about justice systems and human rights. But despite all the recognition, he always remembered where it all began. In that ruined house, with 5 frightened children who needed to believe their father wasn't a criminal. Mr. Harrison, a journalist said during an interview, what was the most important moment in your entire journey? David thought about the question. It was when my daughter Sarah called me Dad for the first time after I got out of prison. In that moment, I knew there was still hope to rebuild our family. And if I could rebuild my family, I could rebuild anything. And what is your greatest achievement? Seeing my children become people who fight for justice and help others. They could have become bitter because of the hardships they went through. Instead, they became people who want to make the world better. What advice would you give to families going through similar injustices? Never give up. The truth may take time to appear, but it always does. And while you fight for the truth, keep your family united, because family unity is the most powerful force there is. At 65, David decided to retire from public office. He had fulfilled his mission of creating a national system to combat judicial injustices. He returned to his hometown where he was welcomed as a hero. The city council decided to name the town's main square after him. David was moved by the tribute, but made one request. If you truly wish to honor me, put a plaque in the square that says, "To all who fight for truth and justice even when it seems impossible." Harrison Square became a gathering place for families facing injustices. Every Saturday, David would go there to talk to people who needed guidance and encouragement. Sarah, who now had 3 children, always brought the kids to visit their grandfather in the square. "Grandpa," asked Petey, Marina's oldest son, "why do people come talk to you in the square?" "Because sometimes people need to hear from someone who's been through hard times that it's possible to overcome any problem, Petey." "And did you go through a lot of hard times?" David looked at Sarah, who smiled encouragingly. "I did, my grandson. Much more than you can imagine. But do you know what saved me? What? Family. Having people who loved me and who needed me gave me the strength to never give up. Grandpa, when I grow up, I want to help people like you do." David hugged his grandson. "Petey, you can help people in many different ways. What's important is to always do good and fight for what's right." At 70 years old, David launched his second book, Letters to My Grandchildren, where he shared the life lessons he had learned during his journey. The book became a guide for parents and grandparents on how to teach values to new generations. During the book launch, all of David's children were present, along with their spouses and children. "Dad," said Sarah during her speech at the launch ceremony, "I wanted to thank you publicly for everything you've done for our family." "Sarah, Dad, let me finish. You took 5 frightened children and turned them into adults who make a difference in the world. You taught us that family isn't just blood, it's a daily choice to love and support each other. You taught us that the truth is worth defending, even when it costs dearly. You taught us that we can turn suffering into strength to help other people. But most of all, you taught us that we should never give up on the people we love." David's eyes were filled with tears. "Sarah, you all are the ones who taught me those things. You gave me the strength to fight when I wanted to give up. You showed me it was worth rebuilding our family." Ethan stood up. "Dad, I want to say something too. When you came back from prison, I was angry at the whole world. I got into fights at school. I didn't respect anyone. You taught me that anger can be turned into determination. Today I use that determination to teach sports to kids who, like I was, need direction." Grace also stood up. "Dad, I was a shy and scared little girl. You taught me I can use my art to convey important messages. Today my paintings speak about justice, about family, about overcoming." Caleb was next. Dad, I was the middle child who didn't know where I fit in. You taught me that every person has a unique talent. Today I use my music to bring joy to children who are suffering. Finally, Lily stood up. Dad, I was very little when you came back. I didn't remember you. I was afraid of you. But you had patience. You had love. You had dedication. Today I'm finishing medical school because I want to heal people the same way you healed our family. David could no longer hold back his tears. My children, my grandchildren, my family. You are the proof that it's worth fighting. You are the proof that love can overcome any difficulty. The entire audience rose in an ovation that lasted several minutes. After the ceremony, the family gathered at David's house for dinner. Dad, said Sarah, have you ever thought about how you want to be remembered? What do you mean? When you're no longer here, how do you want people to remember you? David thought about the question. Sarah, I want to be remembered as a father who never gave up on his children, as a man who fought for the truth even when it seemed impossible, and most of all as someone who proved that a united family can overcome any adversity. Dad, said Lily, you're already remembered that way. And it will continue to be, because we will pass your story on to our children, who will pass it on to their children. David smiled. Lily, that's the only immortality I believe in, living on in the memory and values of the people we love. At 75, David was playing with his grandchildren in the backyard when he felt a pain in his chest. He was quickly taken to the hospital where the doctors diagnosed a heart problem. Mr. Harrison, said the doctor, you've had a heart attack, but we've managed to stabilize you. However, your heart is very weak. It's important that you rest and avoid strong emotions. David looked at his children, who were gathered around the bed. Doctor, how much time do I have? Mr. Harrison, that depends on many factors. With care, medication, and rest, you could still live for a few years. David nodded. During his recovery, David reflected on his life. He had started as a broken man, returning to a shattered family. Now he was surrounded by accomplished children, loving grandchildren, and the recognition of having helped thousands of people. Dad, Sarah said during a visit, are you afraid? Afraid of death? No, my daughter. I've lived a full life. I've watched you all grow up and become good people. I've helped many families find justice. I'm not afraid. But Dad, we still need you. David held his daughter's hand. Sarah, you don't need me to survive anymore. You need me to share happy moments. And while I'm here, let's enjoy every moment. David recovered from that first heart attack and lived for 3 more years. They were years filled with much love, many conversations, and many moments with family. He saw 2 more grandchildren be born. He saw Sarah become a judge. He saw Ethan expand his sports school to other cities. He saw Grace have her first international exhibition. He saw Caleb record a CD with songs for hospitalized children. He saw Lily graduate from medical school with the top grades in her class. At 78, during a Sunday lunch with the whole family gathered, David had another heart attack. This time, he did not survive. David Harrison died at home surrounded by the people he loved most in the world. His funeral was an event that mobilized the entire city. Thousands of people came to pay their respects. Representatives from all over the country came for the funeral, including many families David had helped through the foundation. During the ceremony, Sarah read a letter David had written to be read after his death. My dear children, grandchildren, and friends, if you are hearing this letter, it means my journey in this world has come to an end. But do not be sad, because it was a wonderful journey. When I returned from prison so many years ago and saw you in that ruined house, I thought our family was destroyed forever. But you showed me that family is not a place, it's a feeling. It's the daily choice to love and support each other. You taught me that hardships do not destroy good people, they strengthen them. You taught me that it's worth fighting for the truth, even when it seems impossible. But most of all, you taught me the meaning of unconditional love. Sarah, my courageous daughter, who grew up before her time to care for her siblings. You taught me that responsibility and love can turn a child into a heroine. Ethan, my warrior son, who turned his anger into determination. You taught me that we can channel our strongest emotions to do good. Grace, my sensitive daughter, who uses her art to touch people's hearts. You taught me that beauty can be found even in the most difficult moments. Caleb, my musician son, who brings joy wherever he goes. You taught me that we can use our talents to lessen the suffering in the world. Lily, my youngest, who grew up determined to heal people. You taught me it's possible to transform experiences of pain into motivation to help others. To all of you, I leave the same legacy my parents left for me: solid values, unconditional love, and the certainty that a united family can overcome any obstacle. Keep fighting for justice, keep helping people in need, keep being the extraordinary family you have become, and always remember, the truth may take time to appear, but it always appears. Love may be tested, but it always wins. And a united family is the most powerful force in the universe. I love you more than words can express. And wherever I am now, I will be proud of you forever. With all my love, Dad. When Sarah finished reading the letter, there wasn't a dry eye at the ceremony. After the funeral, David's children gathered to decide how they would continue their father's legacy. "The foundation cannot stop," said Sarah. "Dad always said the fight for justice is eternal." "Let's expand it even further," agreed Ethan. "Each of us will contribute with our skills." "I will create a series of artworks about Dad's life," said Grace, "so people never forget his story." "And I will compose a musical about our family," added Caleb, "a story that inspires other families to never give up." "I will write a book about social medicine," said Lily. "Dad always said that caring for people is the purest form of love." 1 year after David's death, the National Network for Combating Judicial Injustices had helped more than 10,000 families. Harrison Square became a pilgrimage point for people seeking inspiration in difficult times. David's books continued to be sold and translated into various languages. But David Harrison's greatest legacy was not the awards, the books, or the honors. It was a united family that had learned to transform suffering into strength, difficulties into opportunities, and pain into motivation to help others. It was living proof that the truth always wins, love always prevails, and that we should never give up on the people we love. It was the certainty that, no matter how difficult the situation, there is always hope for those who have the courage to fight. And most of all, it was the demonstration that a united family can overcome any adversity and come out even stronger on the other side. The story of David Harrison and his family became legend in his hometown. Parents told their children about the man who returned from prison to find his home in ruins, but never gave up on rebuilding his family. Teachers used his story in class to teach about perseverance, justice, and family values. Lawyers studied his methods to help clients in similar situations. Social workers drew inspiration from his work to develop support programs for struggling families. But perhaps most importantly, his story continued to inspire ordinary people to never give up fighting for what is right. "Grandpa David was an ordinary man who did extraordinary things," Sarah would tell her children. "He didn't have superpowers. He only had love for his family and determination to fight for the truth." "And can we do extraordinary things too?" Petey would ask. "Of course you can. You are descendants of a family that learned to turn difficulties into victories. You have that power in your blood." 15 years after David's death, Lily inaugurated a public hospital specialized in care for underprivileged families. The hospital was named David Harrison, a place of hope. At the inauguration ceremony, Lily gave an emotional speech. "My father always said that caring for people is the purest form of love. This hospital is our way of continuing to care for people, especially those who need it most. My father taught that it doesn't matter where we come from, but where we are going. It doesn't matter how many times we fall, but how many times we get back up. It doesn't matter what we have lost, but what we do with what we have left. This hospital is for all families who are facing difficulties, to remind them that there is always hope, there are always people willing to help, and there is always a chance to start over." In the hospital, there was a special room called the family room, where patients' relatives could gather, talk, and find mutual support. On the wall of the room, there was a photo of the Harrison family gathered at the last Christmas dinner before David's death, and a phrase, "A family united is the most powerful force in the universe." 20 years after David's death, his story was made into a film. The movie, The Truth Always Prevails, won several awards and brought the Harrison family's story to millions of people worldwide. During the film's premiere, Sarah, now a nationally respected judge, was interviewed. "Judge Sarah, what is it like to see your family's story on the big screen?" "It's emotional, but it's also a responsibility. Millions of people will learn our story. I hope it inspires other families to never give up." "What was the greatest lesson you learned from your father?" "That there are no problems too big for a united family. That the truth may take time to come out, but it always does. And that love is capable of overcoming any adversity." "If your father could see where the family is today, what would he say?" Sarah smiled with tears in her eyes. "He would say, 'You did exactly what I knew you would do. You turned our pain into strength to help other people. I am proud of you.'" 30 years after David's death, Petey, David's grandson and Sarah's son, graduated from law school and began working at the foundation created by his grandfather. "Why did you decide to follow in your grandfather's footsteps?" asked a journalist. "Because I grew up hearing his stories. I grew up knowing my family overcame impossible things. That gave me a responsibility to keep helping people the way my grandfather did." "Did you know your grandfather?" "I knew him as a child. I remember him as a kind man who always had time to play with me, who told amazing stories. Only when I grew up did I understand that those stories were real, that he had lived through all of that." "What is your strongest memory of him?" "One afternoon when I was sad because other boys had made fun of me at school. My grandfather took me for a walk in the square named after him and said, 'Petey, when people treat you badly, you have two choices. You can get angry, or you can use it as motivation to be a better person. I chose to be better, and you can choose that too.' And did that lesson leave a mark on you?" "It marked my entire life. Whenever I face a difficulty, I remember my grandfather's words. And I remember that I come from a family that turned the greatest injustice into strength to help thousands of people." 40 years after David Harrison's death, his story was still told and retold. The Harrison Justice Foundation had become the largest organization fighting judicial injustices in Latin America. The Harrison Memorial Hospital served thousands of people each year and became a national benchmark in social medicine. Harrison Square was visited by people from all over the country seeking inspiration. His books continued to be bestsellers and were studied in universities as examples of overcoming adversity and fighting for human rights. But David Harrison's greatest legacy remained his family. A family that had learned that love is stronger than any adversity, that truth always prevails over lies, and that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they fight for what is right. A family that had proven that no matter how far you fall, it is always possible to get back up and rebuild your life. A family that had shown that the greatest victories are not won in courtrooms or palaces, but in the hearts of the people we love. And above all, a family that had learned that true wealth is not in what we possess, but in the people with whom we share our lives. The story of David Harrison began with a man returning to a house in ruins and 5 frightened children. It ended with a united family that changed the lives of thousands of people and left a legacy of hope that would span generations. Because in the end, David Harrison had proven the greatest truth of all, that a family's love can overcome any obstacle, transform any pain into strength, and create hope where there was once only despair. And that is a lesson that no injustice, no lie, no adversity can destroy. It is a lesson that will live forever in the hearts of all those who believe in the transformative power of a family's love. End of story. Now tell me what you thought of this moving story of overcoming and fighting for justice. Do you believe David made the right decisions during his journey? How would you react if you were in the same situation? Leave your honest opinion in the comments, because we love to know what you think about these life stories that show we should never give up the fight for truth. And if you've made it this far, don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel to follow other inspiring stories like this one.